Welcome to Lesson 4.2 of the Grant Architect course, where we dive deep into the first component of the logic model. In this lesson, we focus on inputs, which represent the raw materials invested in your program and the resources that make everything else possible. Without adequate inputs, even the best designed program cannot succeed because you lack the foundation needed for implementation. Understanding inputs is essential because they define precisely what you need to implement your program successfully and form the basis of your budget justification. Funders scrutinize inputs carefully to assess whether you have the resources to deliver on your promises. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify and categorize different types of inputs systematically, connect inputs directly to budget development, and ensure your inputs are sufficient for all planned activities and realistic to obtain. Inputs are the resources invested in or consumed by your program throughout its operation. They represent everything you need to have in place before you can conduct program activities effectively. Different funders may call these resources investments or program requirements, but the underlying concept is identical regardless of terminology used. The primary function of inputs is to enable activities to occur at the scale and quality needed for success. Without adequate inputs, activities cannot happen at all or cannot happen effectively enough to produce meaningful results. Staff conduct training sessions that serve participants. Facilities house programs and create appropriate environments. Materials support learning and service delivery. Each input serves specific activities in your program design. The relationship between inputs and the rest of the logic model is fundamentally transformational in nature. Inputs are transformed into outputs through the activities you conduct. Your staff time, facilities, equipment, and materials get converted into services delivered, people served, and products created through the work of your program. Inputs fall into several major categories that you should consider systematically when developing your logic model. Financial inputs include grant funds you are requesting from this specific funder, matching funds from your organization or other funding sources, and in-kind contributions that have quantifiable monetary value. Human inputs encompass staff who will work directly on the program, volunteers who contribute their valuable time, consultants providing specialized expertise you do not have internally, and partner organizations contributing effort and personnel to your initiative. Physical inputs include facilities where the program operates and serves participants, equipment used in service delivery, materials consumed or distributed during program activities, and technology enabling program functions and data management. Informational inputs are often overlooked but critically important for program quality. Curriculum or program models you will use to guide implementation, data informing your approach and targeting, research supporting your methods and demonstrating evidence, and best practices guiding implementation quality are all essential inputs that strengthen your program design. Financial inputs require careful consideration because they form the foundation of your budget and determine what resources you can actually deploy. The grant request is the primary financial input, representing the specific funding you are seeking from this funder. This amount should be fully justified by your detailed budget and sufficient for all planned activities at the scale you describe. Match requirements exist for many grants, requiring you to contribute organizational funds or document in-kind contributions as your share of the investment. Federal grants often require specific match percentages such as 20% or 25% of total project costs. Understand these requirements carefully before applying to ensure you can meet them. Leveraged funds represent additional resources that this grant enables you to access from other sources. A federal grant might unlock state matching funds. Foundation support might help attract additional donors through a challenge grant. Show funders how their investment multiplies impact. Sustainability considerations address the resources needed for program continuation after the grant period ends. Funders want to know the program will not simply stop when their specific funding ends. What financial inputs will sustain it into the future? Human inputs are often the most critical resources because programs succeed or fail based on the people implementing them. Staff positions define who will implement the program and what roles they will fill. Be specific about roles such as project director, case manager, outreach coordinator, and data specialist. Each position should have clear responsibilities that connect to your activities. Qualifications specify what expertise is required for each role and why that expertise matters. If positions require licenses, certifications, or specific experience, note these requirements clearly. This justifies salary levels in your budget and demonstrates organizational capacity to deliver. Time allocation indicates how much effort from each position will be dedicated to this program specifically. Express this in full-time equivalents or percentage of time committed. A project director at 50% time contributes very different inputs than one at 100%, affecting what they can accomplish. Partnerships contribute essential human resources beyond your own organization's staff. Partners may provide staff time, volunteer coordination, specialized expertise, or access to populations. Document specifically what each collaborator contributes as inputs to your program. Physical inputs provide the tangible infrastructure that enables your program to operate and serve participants effectively. Facilities include space for program operations where activities will take place. Where will activities actually occur? Do you have adequate space in your current facilities, or do you need to secure additional space through lease or partnership? Consider accessibility for participants with disabilities, location relative to your target population for convenience, and capacity to handle the number of participants you plan to serve. Equipment encompasses all the tools needed for your activities to be conducted properly. Medical equipment for health programs, computers for training and technology programs, vehicles for mobile outreach, and specialized tools for specific interventions are all examples of equipment inputs you should identify. Materials are consumables used or distributed during program implementation. Educational materials, testing supplies, food for nutrition programs, safety supplies, and similar items that are used up or given away to participants are material inputs that need regular replenishment. Technology includes systems supporting program function and administration. Database software, communication systems, program management tools, virtual meeting platforms, and data collection applications are technology inputs increasingly important in modern programs. Informational inputs are often overlooked but absolutely crucial for program quality and credibility. Curriculum or model refers to the specific program approach you will use to guide implementation. If implementing an evidence-based program, that curriculum itself is an input you bring to the table. If using established protocols and procedures, those documented approaches are inputs. This demonstrates you are not inventing an untested approach from scratch. Data guiding your program represents valuable informational inputs. Needs assessment data informing who you target and how, baseline data enabling meaningful evaluation, and community information guiding local adaptation are all informational inputs that significantly improve program design and demonstrate thoughtfulness. Research supporting your methods provides the foundation for your entire approach. The evidence base you reviewed before designing the program, studies informing your specific design choices, and literature establishing best practices in your field are all inputs that strengthen your program theory. Standards or guidelines you will follow are important inputs. Professional standards from your field, accreditation requirements you must meet, or specific funder guidelines that shape your approach are all informational inputs ensuring program quality and compliance. Inputs connect directly to budget development, creating a critical alignment that reviewers examine carefully. Every input should appear somewhere in your budget, and every budget line should connect to an input in your logic model. Personnel costs fund your human inputs through salary and benefit allocations. Salaries and fringe benefits for staff positions listed as inputs should match budget personnel lines exactly. If you list a project coordinator as an input in your logic model, that position should appear in the budget with appropriate salary and effort level. Direct costs fund equipment, materials, and supplies listed as inputs in your logic model. If your logic model shows educational materials as an input your program needs, your budget should include a specific line item for those materials with a reasonable cost estimate. Indirect costs often fund facilities and administrative support that enables program operation. Space, utilities, and administrative staff that support the program may be covered through negotiated indirect cost rates applied to your direct costs. Alignment means your budget should fund all listed inputs without exception. If an input appears in your logic model but not your budget, reviewers will question how you will obtain it. Conversely, if budget items do not connect to inputs shown in the logic model, they may seem unjustified or unnecessary. Evaluating sufficiency of inputs is critical for logic model credibility because reviewers assess whether you have the resources to deliver on your promises. Adequacy asks whether inputs are sufficient for your planned activities at the scale you propose. If you plan to serve 500 clients annually, do you have enough staff to handle that caseload? If you plan 10 workshops, do you have adequate facilities to accommodate participants? Inputs must match the scope of activities you promise to deliver. Realism questions whether you can actually obtain these inputs in the real world. Listing inputs you cannot realistically secure undermines your entire proposal credibility. If you need specialized staff, can you recruit them in your labor market? If you need partner contributions, are partners formally committed to providing them? Proportionality examines whether your inputs match the scope of outcomes you claim. Ambitious outcomes require substantial inputs to achieve them. If you claim you will transform community health outcomes with minimal staff and a modest budget, the mismatch signals unrealistic expectations that experienced reviewers will recognize. Gaps analysis identifies what inputs might be missing from your plan. Review your logic model with skepticism as if you were an outside reviewer. Are there resources you need that you have not listed? Missing inputs suggest incomplete planning. In-kind contributions are important inputs that deserve special attention in your proposal development process. By definition, these are non-cash resources contributed to the program that have quantifiable value. They have real monetary value, even though no cash changes hands between parties. Examples include volunteer time valued at appropriate hourly rates based on the work being performed, donated space for program activities valued at fair market rental rates, pro bono professional services like legal or accounting support valued at standard professional rates, and donated materials or equipment valued at fair market prices. Documentation requirements are strict for in-kind contributions, especially on federal grants where compliance matters greatly. You must value contributions using appropriate and defensible methods and maintain thorough documentation. Proving contributions were actually provided as claimed. Check specific funder requirements for acceptable valuation methods before counting these contributions. Strategic value of in-kind contributions extends well beyond their dollar value for matching purposes. They demonstrate meaningful community investment in your program and shared ownership of program success. When partners contribute their own resources, it shows genuine commitment to the initiative and sustainability potential beyond the grant period. Partner contributions represent important inputs that require careful documentation to be credible and useful for matching purposes. Resource sharing asks specifically what partners contribute to the program in concrete terms. This might include staff time at specific levels, facilities for particular uses, specialized expertise on defined topics, referrals of potential participants, or direct funding. Be very specific about what each partner provides and at what level or quantity. Formalization addresses how partner contributions are documented in writing. Memoranda of understanding, formal partnership agreements, or detailed letters of commitment formalize exactly what partners will provide and when. Vague verbal assurances are far less credible than formal written commitments that reviewers can verify. Reliability considers how certain partner commitments are likely to be honored in practice. Partners who have worked with you before and consistently delivered on their commitments are more reliable than new relationships without track records. Experienced funders will assess whether partner inputs will actually materialize as promised. Letters of commitment should document specific contributions in measurable terms. Rather than generic support letters expressing enthusiasm, seek detailed letters specifying exactly what the partner will contribute. Examples include 15 hours per week of case management support, use of training facility twice monthly, or 200 participant referrals annually. Presenting inputs effectively in your logic model requires thoughtful visual design that communicates clearly without overwhelming readers. Concise categories group inputs logically rather than listing every individual item separately in one long list. Categories like personnel, facilities, materials, and technology organize inputs clearly without overwhelming viewers with excessive detail. Appropriate detail provides enough information to understand your inputs without overwhelming the visual presentation. Major categories and key items should appear prominently in your logic model diagram. Exhaustive lists of every supply or minor item belong in the budget narrative document, not the logic model graphic itself. Visual hierarchy makes the most important inputs visually prominent so reviewers notice them immediately. Critical resources that are essential for program success should stand out in your design. If your program depends heavily on specialized staff with particular expertise, that should be visually emphasized through placement or formatting. Budget connection should be readily visible to reviewers as they examine your documents. When they look at your logic model inputs and then turn to your budget, the alignment should be immediately obvious. Disconnects between what the logic model claims you will use and what the budget actually funds raise serious questions about proposal quality. Several common mistakes undermine input sections and reduce your proposal credibility with experienced reviewers. Omitting key resources occurs when critical inputs are forgotten or overlooked during planning. Staff for essential functions, facilities for planned activities, or materials required for implementation might be missing from your logic model. Review your inputs systematically against your activities to ensure completeness and identify any gaps. Unrealistic inputs list resources you cannot actually obtain given your organizational situation and context. Dream team staff with credentials you cannot realistically recruit in your market, facilities you cannot access through existing relationships, or partner contributions that are not formally committed all undermine your proposal credibility. Every input you list must be realistically obtainable. Budget mismatch appears when inputs listed in your logic model are not reflected anywhere in your budget document. If the logic model lists curriculum development as an input but no budget line funds that development work, reviewers will question program feasibility immediately. Every single input needs an identifiable funding source. Vague descriptions make inputs too generic for reviewers to evaluate meaningfully. Phrases like adequate staff or appropriate materials do not communicate what you actually have available. Be specific enough that reviewers can assess whether your inputs are truly sufficient for your planned activities. Here is a practical exercise to apply what you have learned about inputs to your own program planning work. Step 1. List all human resources your program requires to operate effectively. Include staff positions with specific time allocations expressed as full-time equivalents, consultants with defined scopes, volunteers with estimated hours, and partner personnel contributions. Be specific about roles, required expertise, and qualifications for each position. Step 2. Identify all physical resources needed for your activities to be conducted successfully. Consider facilities where activities will occur, equipment needed for service delivery, materials that will be consumed or distributed, and technology supporting operations and data collection. For each planned activity in your program, ask what physical resources are required to deliver it. Step 3. Note informational inputs guiding your program approach and implementation. What curriculum, needs assessment data, research evidence, or professional standards inform your program design. Listing these inputs demonstrates that your approach is grounded in evidence and established best practices rather than being invented without foundation. Step 4. Check that each input you listed has an identifiable funding source. Review your complete input list against your budget document carefully. Inputs funded by the grant request, by required match, by documented partner contributions, or by valued in-kind contributions should all be clearly accounted for. Let us summarize the key points from this lesson on inputs as the foundation of your logic model. Inputs are defined as resources invested in or consumed by the program throughout its operation. They represent everything you need to have in place before program activities can occur and services can be delivered. Categories of inputs include financial resources like grant funds and required match, human resources like staff and partners contributing time and expertise, physical resources like facilities and equipment enabling service delivery, and informational resources like curriculum and research guiding your approach. Systematic consideration of all categories ensures your logic model is complete and realistic. Budget connection requires that all inputs align with your budget document. Every input should have a clearly identified funding source, and every budget line item should connect to an input shown in the logic model. This alignment demonstrates careful planning and internal consistency that reviewers appreciate. In our next lesson, we will explore activities, detailing exactly what your program will do with the resources you have identified. Activities transform inputs into outputs through the work your staff conducts, ultimately producing the outcomes funders care about achieving. Understanding activities is essential for explaining your program approach.